Hey, it's Pastor Chris back on Facebook. And speaking of Facebook, I hope you caught our church service, Easter Sunday service, this past Sunday on Facebook, especially the sideways one. And we left the sideways one there in case you want to stay in bed a little bit longer to watch it. And so it would make sense if you were like sideways. So then we put a right side up one, so if you watched it a little bit later, you would be right side up and able to watch it. If you haven't checked it out, take a look on the church's Facebook page and watch those Easter Sunday videos. Hey, speaking of being in bed, have you been staying in bed much later than usual? I mean, after this whole thing started, do you find yourself just wanting to be in bed more, or maybe like going to bed by like 8 o'clock? It reminds me of my grandparents. They lived in northern Maine, and it was Bud and Alberta. That was their names, and they'd be hanging around in the evening time. Where we'd be up there visiting them, and Bud would say, "Oh yeah, Berta, it's 7:30. Time to turn in." Turn in. This is what they call it. Turn in. What are you turning into? I mean, when I turn in, I like turn into a drive-through or something like that. And they're sitting in their side-by-side recliners, like, they're watching, Wheel of Fortune. And I don't know, maybe my grandfather thinks he's got the remote control, so he's driving. And so he's going to turn in to go to bed. And my grandmother, she'd sit there and say, yeah, this is what she, my grandfather says, and my grandmother says it the other way, like when you breathe in and say it. This is a northern New England thing. So it's not but it's, and it's like you're gasping for air when you're saying the but so try it with me. Ready? So turning in, this is what they did. I turn into the grocery store when I'm looking for maybe toilet paper, which I still can't find anymore. Or if I don't get enough sleep, I turn into a grouch. Or if I keep eating during this whole pandemic thing, I'm going to turn into the Michelin Man. Or last week's leftovers in the fridge, they're turning into a science experiment right now. Well, speaking of turning, it seems like we are turning a corner here. And we're getting better. We're flattening the curve, like the Duke boys. They were straightening the curves and flattening the hills. Well, we're flattening the curve right now and coming around, and we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, kind of like this tunnel right here with that beautiful greenery and the trees and the light at the end of the tunnel. It feels like we've been doing this for like 40 years or something. I mean, it's only been, a month or less. But it feels like our 40 years we've been doing this, which reminds me of the Israelites. When they had left Egypt and God brought them out of Egypt, they were wandering around the desert for 40 years. God had a place for them to be called the Promised Land, and they just couldn't get there. They were wandering around, turning in and turning out and turning all over the place for 40 years, doing this and that and not being able to get there. But finally, after 40 years, they got the instructions from God to turn in, to take a turn towards the Promised Land. And it must have been like a light at the end of the tunnel for them. It says in the book of Joshua, it says, no one will be able to stand against you. This is God talking to the Israelites. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I went with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous. Do not turn from the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. And they needed to be. They were headed to the Promised Land. It was miles to go before they were to sleep. They needed to be courageous and strong because there were many, many challenges that still were ahead of them. Even though they saw the light at the end of the tunnel and they were entering the Promised Land, there was still so much to do, but God promised that he would be with them as they did it. He would see them through. He said, turn into the Promised Land. Don't turn right or turn left, but keep moving forward. And I think God's saying the same thing to us. You know, the promised land for us is the light at the end of that tunnel right there. It's getting to the other side. It's living without the fear of this virus. It's being able to be with family and friends again. You know, so for a lot of people, the hardest part of this whole thing is just the loneliness of being so trapped and isolated from everybody else. And we see maybe the end where we can actually start to get together again eventually. How exciting is that? You know, the light at the end of the tunnel is the joy of life that we're looking forward to again. But before we get there, we've got some work to do for sure, but it's coming. Just be encouraged. Keep your masks on, keep your spirits up, be strong and courageous, and together we will be successful. I guarantee it.